Oh, hello everyone. Hi everyone. Welcome to another day of Aquarium Online Academy. My name is Sarah. I'm one of the educators here at the Aquarium of the Pacific in Long Beach, California, and we're so excited that you are joining us today, or that we're joining you to go on a whale watch. So I was looking for some things. I spotted you all using my binoculars. But what we're going to do today is we're going to set sail, virtually of course, on the open Pacific Ocean looking for some marine mammals. And we'll talk about what animals we're going to look for. But before we get started, I do want to let you know that we would love to hear from you as you are on this whale watch with us. Now, I've got Captain Soraya and our first mate Jeanette, who are helping control everything you see behind me. And Captain Soraya just put up our text line. So if you have questions, if you want to share observations, if you spot an animal while we're out on the water and you want to share it with us, go ahead and text us at 562-286-1838. And those texts will be live, and Captain Soraya will pass them on to me. Now, that's if you're watching this program. It is January 16th at 2 p.m. If you're watching later, we're so glad that you're joining us, but we're going to ask that you email us those questions at live@lbaop.org, and then we'll be able to respond to you that way. But we would love to hear from you about what you're seeing, about any questions you have, and that you're joining us today on our whale watch. Now, we're going to be setting sail looking for some animals, and I am going to be your naturalist. Now, you might be wondering, what is a naturalist? Well, a naturalist is someone who's trained to go on like a whale watch boat and talk about the natural world. And here at the aquarium, we actually train our staff. We have a partnership with a boat company that leaves right outside of our aquarium, and we train our staff to be naturalists on the boat. I myself am a naturalist, which is why I'm so excited to be talking about all these animals with you today. Now, before we do head out on the boat, I want you to think, if you're a naturalist, or you're an explorer, or you're just going on a whale watch, what kind of things do you think you'll bring with you on the whale watch? There might be some equipment you want to bring with you, like binoculars. Those are really handy. I'm going to set my binoculars down, but if you have binoculars, you want to grab your binoculars, or you can just use your hands to be your binoculars. That helps us spot things. What else might you bring? Now, I'm always really cold on the boat, so I bring lots of layers, including my handy dandy whale watch jacket. Now, the beauty of a virtual whale watch is that it may be really warm where you are, like it is in our studio. So I'm actually going to take off my jacket, but you want to bring lots and lots of layers with you. What else do you think you might want to bring? Maybe a camera. If you like to take pictures and document what you're seeing, you might bring a camera with you. Also, some water, sunscreen, and snacks. Snacks are very important. What do you think would be your favorite snack to take on a boat with you? I'll tell you, my favorite boat snack are those peanut butter, like Ritz sandwich crackers. Those ones are my favorite for the boat. That and goldfish crackers. But you might have your own preference of favorite boat snack. But having lots of snacks is important because we could be out on the water for a long time. So you want to be able to eat some snacks, drink some water while we're looking for animals. All right, you have all your gear ready? You ready to set sail? Excellent. So when we go on the boat, we are looking for marine mammals. So these are animals that are mammals like us, but they spend most of their time in the water. So that's going to be things like whales, dolphins, seals, and sea lions. Now, there's a good chance we'll see other animals, birds, there could be fish, there could even be sharks, but the main thing we're looking for are those marine mammals. Now, Captain Soraya and First Mate Jeanette, they do a great job of looking for these animals. But these animals could be anywhere around us. So we could all be looking in front of us, and something could pop up behind us. And that's why it's super helpful to have all of you explorers keeping your eyes on the water. Now, you might be thinking, okay, but I don't know what I'm looking for. Don't worry, we got you covered. So there are 3 indicators, or 3 things that we say to look for when we're trying to spot these animals. The first thing are waves. Now, you might think at the beach you see lots of waves, but we want to see lots and lots of waves moving up and down over and over and over again. And that could be a sign of maybe some dolphins who spend a lot of time at the surface. The second thing we want to look for are birds. You might be wondering, if we're looking for mammals, why are we looking for birds? Well, there's a lot of birds who spend a lot of their time or their whole life out at sea. And they're feeding on things like fish and squid that live in the water just below the surface. Now, that's the same food that some of these other mammals are going to be eating. So if there's birds diving into the water and there's tons of birds flying around, that means they're likely feeding. And if they're feeding, there's a good chance there are other bigger animals, like some of these marine mammals, feeding there as well. So the second thing we want to look for is bird activity. Now, the third thing we want to look for is the blow or spout from a whale. Now, I wonder if Captain Soraya can put up a picture of the blow or spout of a whale for us. So whales, as I mentioned, they are mammals like us. Now, one of the characteristics that makes a mammal is that we breathe air using our lungs. So I want everyone to take a deep breath in through their nose and out through your mouth. It's kind of relaxing, kind of nice to do that. But we just breathe air into our lungs and then we breathe it out. Whales, they do the same thing. So they can't stay underwater forever. They do have to come to the surface, they have to exhale, and then inhale, and then they're going to hold their breath as they dive back down. Now, in this picture, this is a blue whale, and you can see this sort of bump right here. That is their nose or their nostrils. So for whales, it's basically like they took their nose, and instead of it being on the front of their head or their face, they moved it to the top of their head. And they've got two nostrils. They've got two nostrils exposed for a blue whale. We'll talk about that in a little bit. But they've got these two nostrils here, and they're going to exhale. Now, it kind of looks like they're shooting water into the air, but it's not actually water that they're spraying out of their lungs. That wouldn't be very good to have air in your lungs. So what happens is when the whale dives down and they come to the surface, their nostril is kind of like a little bowl shape. So it's closed, but when they open it like this to exhale, all the water that got caught in this shape right here, they're going to send into the air. And the air inside their body is really hot, and the air outside is pretty cold. So when they exhale, it takes that water and it makes it into this big cloud of mist or smoke. And depending on the type of whale, that blow is going to be a different shape and a different size. For blue whales, their blow or spout can go about 20 to 30 feet high in the air. Some whales that are smaller are going to have a smaller blow, but the blue whale, as the largest animal on the planet, when they exhale from their lungs, they can send that cloud of mist or smoke up 20 to 30 feet high in the air. And that means that we can see it from quite a distance. Now, it's always helpful to have binoculars, but even without binoculars, you can see their spout from quite a distance. So that is the third thing we're going to look for. So we're looking for splashing, we're looking for bird activity, and we're looking for the blow or spout from a whale. Now, we're going to set sail on the water, and we're going to start looking, and we're going to see what Captain Soraya can find for us. So let's get our binoculars out, start looking around, and see what we can spot. Ooh, there's some splashes. Do you see them? Oh my goodness, look, that was so fast, which is amazing that Captain Soraya found us this awesome pod of an animal. Does anyone recognize what these animals are? That's right, these are dolphins. So, as I said, a pod of dolphins, and a pod is a group of dolphins. Now, these are a very special kind of dolphin, but sometimes it's kind of hard to tell what animal we're looking at. You might know they're dolphins, but as a naturalist, my job is to tell you the specifics of what we're looking for. But I want to share how I can identify the type of dolphin that we're looking at. Now, here in Southern California, where we're whale watching, we are what we call a hot spot for these marine mammals, dolphins and whales. And we have a couple of animals who spend their whole year with us, so they don't really migrate or travel from place to place. And then we have some whale species that visit our coastline for very specific reasons. Now, these dolphins here, these ones are called common dolphins, and they are one of what we call our resident species, which means they don't travel many other places. We just find them here. And we find them in really, really large pods or groups. For common dolphins, we can anywhere from a couple hundred to a couple thousand dolphins together. When we see them in the thousands, we call it a super or a megapod because it's massive. Sometimes you'll see dolphins just all around you as far as the eye can see. Now, I did identify these as common dolphins, and I'm going to show you a couple pictures of the different kinds of dolphins and how I knew those were common dolphins. So these ones here, these are bottlenose dolphins, and their body color and their size are a little different. So when I'm looking to try and identify what type of dolphin, I'm looking at the size of the animal, and I'm looking at the colors on their body. For bottlenose, they're a little bit larger than those common dolphins. Bottlenose get about 13 feet long. And the color on their body is pretty much a solid gray. It's a little bit darker on their back than their belly, but their whole body is pretty much a gray color. And they're often in smaller pods. So for bottlenose, we might see 15, 20, maybe 30, 50, but we're not going to see those super mega pods of thousands of bottlenose dolphin. So that's another clue. So that's our bottlenose, but let's take a look at our common dolphin. Excellent. Now, a lot of people would say that they're not very common looking, and their name is not because they're sort of common or generic looking, but they're called common dolphins because we commonly see them here, and we have one of the highest concentrations of populations of common dolphins in Southern California. So common dolphins can be found across the world, but we have sort of the densest population of them here in Southern California. Now, what I look for are the different color patterns on this dolphin's body compared to the bottlenose. They're also smaller. These dolphins only get about 8 feet long, but look at their really interesting color pattern. They've got this really dark back, so it's really dark gray. They've got a cream color in the middle, and then the bottom is white. So they're 3 colors. So when I see these animals jumping out of the water, I'm looking for the different color pattern that I can find on their body, and that's going to help me identify what type of animal we're looking at. Now, these dolphins here, I want to point out something because you can see it really well. Right here is their blowhole. So we talked about that spout or blow from a whale. Dolphins do the same thing, but because they're so much smaller, you don't really see that spray come out. Now, their blowhole, they have one opening at their blowhole. For a whale like that blue whale, they actually have 2 nostrils on top. Now, these dolphins here, they actually have 2 nostrils, but one is inside and one is outside. So dolphins, which are animals that have teeth in their mouth, they're going to have one blowhole outside. So if you're looking at an animal and you look down and you only see one blowhole, you know that that animal is actually going to have teeth in its mouth. Kind of interesting. So dolphins all have teeth in their mouth and they have one blowhole. Animals like that blue whale, they have 2 nostrils, and if we're going to look in their mouth, we're not going to find any teeth. We're going to find something else called baleen. Now, baleen are these keratin plates. So keratin's the stuff that our nail is made of. These keratin plates that hang down from the upper jaw of these animals. We've got a good picture. So this right here is a humpback whale, which is a type of baleen whale. If we saw at the very top, we would notice 2 blowholes, and then when they smile at us, they've got baleen. So these are not teeth. They don't grab a hold or chew their food, but they use them as a filter. Think about if you ever have made pasta or you've seen someone make pasta. You boil the pasta in water on your stove, and then you need to separate the pasta from the water. So you pour it into a strainer, sort of like a bowl with holes in it. And all that water drains out, but the pasta stays. And baleen works pretty similar to that. This whale is going to dive down into the water. It's going to open its mouth really wide. It's going to take a big gulp of water. Not going to swallow it though. Instead, once its mouth is full of water, they're going to use their tongue and they're going to push all that water back out their mouth. And what happens is tiny little things like krill, which are little shrimp, and small fish, they will get stuck on these baleen plates, but water will pass through. So the water comes out, but the food stays in. And then they use that really big tongue to slurp up all of their food. Now let's head over to my document camera really quick, and I'll show you up close this is a tooth from an orca or a killer whale, and this is baleen from a gray whale. So teeth in their mouth, animals like dolphins, killer whales, sperm whales, they all have teeth in their mouth. So they're going to be eating things like fish, squid, larger animals. And then we've got whales like the humpback whale, the blue whale, or the gray whale, which this is from. And they have these keratin plates in their mouth. They've kind of got like bristles and then this rounded part. And that is what they're going to use to feed. Now I have a bigger piece of baleen. And this is from a humpback whale. I'm going to hold it up in front of the camera first, and then I'll put it on my doc cam. So this is a much larger piece. And it's got this sort of brush-like structure here. This is on the inside of their mouth, and this is on the outside. So if the whale is smiling at you, you'll see these ridges. If you find yourself inside the mouth of a whale for whatever reason, you're going to see these bristles. So I'm going to move it over to my document camera real quick. So this is the outside, and this is the inside. And this brush-like structure is what's going to catch all the food, and then the water will escape through all these different plates. And depending on the type of whale, the number of plates varies, but whales can have like 200 plates per side of their jaw. So it's only on the upper side of their jaw, or the upper jaw. But if you think about your jaw in 2 pieces, like this side, they could have 200 on this side and 200 on this side, all packed in there, helping them catch their food. Pretty neat. So those dolphins, they only have one blowhole, they have teeth in their mouth, and they're going to be eating things like fish and squid, versus our baleen whales, which are going to be feeding on smaller food that they can filter out. Now this is a really pretty dolphin. This is one of my favorite dolphins to see. These ones are called Pacific white-sided dolphins. So as I mentioned before, there are some animals who live here year-round. Our Pacific white-sided dolphins are more of a migratory animal. So we don't see them year-round. We see them usually in the winter months. So if you go whale watching right now, you have the potential to see our Pacific white-sided dolphins. Now, what I think is really cool about these ones is their color pattern is very different from both the bottlenose and the common dolphin. They're about the same size as a common dolphin, but they have got this really big two-color fin. This is their dorsal fin, the fin on the back. And it's really curved, and it's got two colors. Their face is also a little bit different. They don't really have that sort of beak-like structure that we see in some other dolphins. And so that helps you identify that this is a different kind of dolphin. This is a Pacific white-sided dolphin. All right, we're going to leave our dolphins behind, and we're going to see what other animals we can find. So get your binoculars out again, and let's take a look. So remember, we're looking for splashing, maybe more dolphins, or bird activity, some animals feeding, or the blow or spout from a whale. Ooh, we have a drone operator on the boat today, and they spotted some animals. We're going to move on over to them. We found some bigger whales. Excellent. Now, I'm going to have Captain Soraya put up our text line again so that number is available. If you have any questions or observations, things you notice about these animals, you can go ahead and text us at 562-286-1838. Now, these whales are pretty spectacular animals. So these are gray whales. And I'm saying they're pretty spectacular because they have a really interesting story. These are another migratory animals. And the gray whales, they have one of, I won't say the longest, but they have one of the longest migrations of any mammal. They travel around 14,000 miles round trip on their migration every year. So let's talk about the story of the gray whale, which is great because right now we are in the middle of gray whale season. So if you go out whale watching now, along with those Pacific white-sided dolphins, you have a very, very good chance of seeing a gray whale. So the gray whales, they spend their summers in Alaska. In Alaska in the summer, there's a lot of sunlight. It is sunlight more than it is dark in Alaska in the summer. And all that sunlight shines down on the water, and it helps plants grow in the water. Little algae and things grow. And those algae actually feed the food that these whales eat. Now, these whales eat things like krill, they eat other kinds of shrimp, and they eat something called amphipods, which are like little crustaceans that live in the mud. And so in the summer, with lots of things growing, there's lots of food for these animals. And so what the whales do is they spend the whole summer eating. That's all they do. They eat and eat and eat, and they're trying to get really, really plump because they're going to start their migration or their travel in about October. So in around October, there tends to be less sunlight, which means there's less food. And that is a signal for our gray whales to start their migration. And they're going to start swimming down the coast of Alaska to Washington, to Oregon, to California. And they're not going to stop here in California. They're still going, and they go all the way down to Mexico. And down in Mexico, in Baja, there are these really beautiful, calm lagoons. So there's warm water, and it's calm water. And that's where these gray whales are going to breed, and if they're pregnant, to give birth. And so they have their cold water feeding grounds up in Alaska and their warm water breeding grounds down in Mexico. And they use the coastline to help them navigate, which means every year on their migration, us here in Southern California, or anywhere on the California coast, but us specifically here in Southern California, you get to see gray whales on their migration. So they're not stopping to feed here, although we do occasionally see them feeding, but they're just on their travels. And as I mentioned, that trip is about 10 to 14,000 miles round trip, which is a really, really long way to travel. But they travel from their cold feeding grounds to their warmer water breeding grounds. Now let's take a look at this gray whale and let's make some observations. Now we haven't talked much about observations, but that's a tool that scientists use to help us study things. And what I think is great about observations is you don't have to know anything about the thing you're looking at. So I might know a lot about whales, but they may be new to you, but we can both make observations because we're just describing what we see. So what do you notice about the gray whale? Maybe we can get a different view of our gray whale, some different perspectives. So something I noticed, which maybe you noticed too, we can see some gray right down here on the bottom. There's sort of some gray patches right here, but there's a lot of other stuff growing on our whale. Now, gray whales are known for having two hitchhikers, two animals that live on their body and kind of just hang out with them wherever they go. So those two animals are barnacles and lice. Now, lice to you might sound like a flag, right? As humans, we do not want lice. Not a good thing. The lice that we find on whales, different animal, and it's actually good for these whales. So they have barnacles and lice covering their body. And they can have around 400 pounds worth of barnacles and lice that they're just lugging around with them that whole migration, their whole life. That's just sort of the life of the gray whale. Now, those barnacles, that's a small animal that attaches to the gray whale, and they feed by sticking these little feathers out of their body, and catching whatever goes by them. Because gray whales are pretty slow moving, it's a great place for these barnacles to live because they're going to be traveling a lot but moving pretty slow, which means there's a lot of food that's going to flow by those barnacles. Now, if you live near tide pool areas, so here in Southern California, we also have a lot of tide pools. We have barnacles and that animal living in the tide pool. But the barnacle on the gray whale is what we call species specific, meaning the barnacles that we find here, you won't find the same ones in the tide pool. Now, those barnacles attach to the whale, and then we've got the lice. Now, that lice actually helps clean the whale's body. So it eats dead skin cells. Sometimes it eats around the barnacle, causing the barnacle to fall off, which isn't too bad for the whale. And so whales actually want to have this lice on their body. Now, down in the lagoons in Mexico, where mothers are giving birth, sometimes scientists will see the mother passing lice onto her baby because it's going to help clean her body or their body. So the lice is always on these whales and the barnacles, and they carry them around with them wherever they go. Now, something else interesting about our gray whale is the way that they eat. Now, I mentioned that they eat things like krill and other shrimp and amphipods, those little crustaceans in the sand or the mud, but they are more of a bottom feeder. And so what this video is showing here is a gray whale feeding. So they do have baleen. They've got that plate-like structure. They're going to filter food out. But whereas animals like our humpback whale or the blue whale, they're feeding in the open water column and they open their mouth and pull in big plumes of water. The gray whales, they actually will dive down to the bottom. So we've got a good picture of it here. They'll dive down to the muddy bottom of wherever their habitat, their home is. They'll turn to one side. They dig their rostrum. We call this front part of their body their rostrum. It's not their nose, remember, because their nose is basically on the top of their head. So their rostrum, they dig it into the mud. They kind of churn up all this muddy water here, and there's all these little animals living in there. And then they come to the surface, and they're going to filter out all that muddy water out of their mouth. And all the animals will get stuck on their baleen, but the muddy water comes out, as we see right here. Pretty cool. Now, what's also neat is that gray whales will be left or right-handed. They're not really hands. They're not using their hands, but gray whales pick a specific side that they prefer when they're diving down. And so you'll see gray whales that have more scarring on the left or the right side of their body. And similar to humans, as the majority of people or more people are right-hand dominant than left-hand, same with whales. There's about 80% of gray whales are right side, have the right side preference, right side dominant, versus 20% for the left side. Now, myself as a lefty, I'm like, way to go, that 20%. But it doesn't really make much of a difference, but we just know that they have a preference, and we can tell by the scarring that we see along their lower jaw. Oh, we see a below. Excellent, excellent spotting, Captain Soraya. Now, this is another great thing or interesting thing about our gray whales is they have this heart-shaped blow. So I mentioned with the blue whale that their blow is about 20 to 30 feet high in the air, but every whale's blow is going to be different, and that depends on sort of the size of the animal and the size of their lungs, but also the angle or shape of their nostrils. And the way that gray whale nostrils are angled, it makes them have this heart-shaped blow when they come to the surface. So that is a way that we can tell what animal it is. If we see the blow sort of right when they come to the surface, before it sort of evaporates into the air, it looks like a heart. So we've got another gray whale that we're seeing, which is great as we see them pass by. So right now we are in the middle of, or sort of the beginning of the southern migration. So the whales are just heading down, and we're slowly starting to see them pass our coastline. Like I said, they leave Alaska in around October, but we don't see them down here in Southern California till about maybe December, but pretty much January, February, and then into March. And in March, there's like a turnaround date where we won't see any whales for a couple days, and then we start to see them heading back up north. And they do that every year. They start that cycle over. So if you're in Southern California or anywhere along the California coast, I highly recommend getting on a boat and trying to see these gray whales on their amazing migration. But we've got a little bit of time left on our whale watch. So let's head out and see what else we can find, if there's any other animals, marine mammals, for us to see on the water. So get your binoculars out again. Oh, Captain Soraya sees something in the distance. Let's see what we're going to. I wonder if it's another gray whale, or let's see what it is. Keep looking. Do you see it? Oh my goodness. This is quite a find that Captain Soraya just found for us. Does anyone recognize what these animals are? Look at that. We've got another boat probably came to see these animals because they are pretty spectacular. So these are orcas or killer whales. Now, a lot of times we hear, oh, we never see killer whales here in Southern California, but that is not true. They are definitely a treat for us. It is not the norm. They are not common like the common dolphins. We don't know that we'll see them every year like the gray whale, but we have been seeing killer whales here along our coast quite a bit in recent years, which is amazing. So let's take a look at this whale, make some observations. What do you notice about its body? Now, I'll tell you something that might kind of surprise you, that killer whales, we call them killer whales, but they're actually a dolphin. I know that might sound weird. Science likes to confuse us with the way we name animals. So whale is actually a big blanket term, sort of covers a lot of animals. And dolphins are all whales. They are just toothed whales. So the orca is actually the largest dolphin species, but a dolphin is a whale. So calling it killer whale makes sense, but it's actually a dolphin. I know it gets kind of confusing. We don't have to spend too much time on those details, but pretty interesting animal. But as a dolphin, it does have teeth in its mouth. And so they are going to be eating things with their teeth. And we looked before, that was that killer whale tooth that was on my document camera. I wonder if we can get some more footage of these amazing animals. Oh, beautiful. As we're heading into the sunset, we've got some more views of, oh, and there's a baby killer whale. So these whales that we're looking at, this is a group of whales called the Eastern Tropical Pacific killer whales. So there's different groups of killer whales. Killer whales are actually found in all of our oceans, pretty much all over the world. Even though we may not see them as often as some other animals, we do find them all over. And there's different groups or pods of killer whales, and we break them down by the things that they eat. So our Eastern Tropical Pacific killer whales actually live in Mexico, and then they'll come up the coast visiting us. And they're mammal eaters. Now, this group of Eastern Tropical Pacific, they were here last year in Southern California, right around this time. This is some video that I took. I was fortunate enough to head on the boat and see these whales. And they are mammal eaters, and they aren't eating other dolphins. So they were feeding on common dolphins. They were here in Southern California, moving up from San Diego to our coastline and back down for about 30 days, feeding on whatever they could find. Now, there's other groups of killer whales that we call transient killer whales, which move up and down the coast. So they'll be here in Southern California, they'll move up to Northern California, sometimes into Oregon, back down, that are also mammal eaters. But transient orcas, they sort of have a preference of food. So not all transient orcas who are mammal eaters will eat dolphins. Some will eat sea lions. Just depends on the group. Then we've got a different group of orcas who live up in the Pacific Northwest area, up in like Washington, that are called resident because they don't travel the way that those transients do. And they mainly feed on salmon. So they're fish eaters. And then there's yet another group of orcas that sometimes we'll see in California, although we don't often see them in our boat because they live offshore, so farther out in the ocean than our whale watch boats go. And they're called offshore killer whales. And they feed on things like rays and sharks. So they really have a varied diet, sort of depending on where the animal lives, what their preferences are. They just eat lots of different things. But they're really spectacular, amazing animals to see. Now, they have really close-knit groups. So this right here is a pod, just like for the common dolphins, we call them pods as well. And they've got their matriline. So there are 2 moms in this group. There are 2 juveniles and 2 babies, as you can see the little babies here in this group. Really amazing to see them. If you ever get the chance, I hope you do, but I'm so excited to be able to share this footage with you. It was really a wonderful experience to be able to see these animals out in their natural habitat. All right. I'm getting the signal that unfortunately it is time for us to head back to dock. That's always the worst part, is you're seeing so many neat things and then you got to head back in. But I hope you enjoyed setting sail with us today, learning about some of the common animals that we have here along our coast, those marine mammals. I hope it encouraged or inspired you to get out on the water and to see some of these animals out in their natural habitat. And if you have any last questions, go ahead and text us or email us. We would love to hear from you. And if you're looking for more programming, don't worry, we've got more programming for you today. We have another program at 3, and then the rest of this week and next week we've got more programming. So tune in, and we hope to see you there. Bye, everyone.